the universe was pulling you away from people, from opportunities, or from the paths you once believed were meant for you. This sensation of being distanced, of standing alone in an unfamiliar stillness, is often mistaken for punishment. But what if it's not? What if this deep isolation is not the universe turning against you, but rather turning you inward, summoning you to a sacred threshold within yourself? Today, we will explore a profound perspective, one that invites us to descend into the symbolic underworld of the psyche and discover that what feels like darkness is in fact the soil of transformation. Guided by the teachings of Carl Jung, the renowned Swiss psychologist who devoted his life to illuminating the hidden realms of the human mind, we will journey into the spiritual and psychological roots of isolation, not as a curse, but as a rite of passage. Jung spoke of the process of individuation as the most vital journey a human being can undertake. But this is no ordinary path of personal growth or societal adaptation. It is an inward pilgrimage, a mysterious unfolding whose purpose is nothing less than the realization of the self, a total integration of the conscious and unconscious layers of our being. Yet this quest is rarely gentle. It demands solitude. It often strips us of what once felt familiar, leaving us in a liminal space where the old has crumbled and the new has not yet taken shape. And it is no coincidence that such isolation tends to emerge in moments of great inner change. According to Jung, individuation is the key to becoming who we truly are, not who the world expects us to be. It calls us to remove the masks we wear to fit into society, and instead search for the unvarnished truth of our being. But this essence does not lie on the surface. It hides beneath layers of conditioning, beneath beliefs we've inherited and versions of ourselves we've hidden or disowned. One of the most difficult stages of individuation is confronting what Jung called the shadow, the parts of ourselves we've banished to the dark, either because we judged them unworthy or because they didn't fit the identity we've tried to maintain. These hidden aspects may include impulses, fears, desires, or qualities we were taught to feel ashamed of. Yet Jung insisted that the shadow was not evil. It is simply unknown. And what is unknown, we fear. Individuation, then, is not just a journey of becoming. It is a process of reconciliation, a radical integration of what we have avoided, a courageous merging of our light with our darkness. It requires us to step toward the very parts of ourselves we've been running from, to dismantle the psychological armor we've built for protection, and to discover that within our most feared traits lies the very key to wholeness. It is here, within the quiet and unsettling space of separation, that isolation reveals its sacred role. Often, the journey of individuation cannot unfold in the presence of others, especially when we are surrounded by people who reinforce our social masks and the expectations we've inherited from the world. In order to hear the whisper of the soul, we must step away from the noise of the outer world. We must detach from the constant hum of influence that drowns out our true nature. This withdrawal may be a conscious choice, like the individual who retreats temporarily from the world in search of inner clarity, or it may arise from life itself, in moments of unforeseen solitude that shake us into stillness. Though often painful, this solitude is not a punishment. It is a crucible for awakening. In the silence and emptiness, we are given the rare chance to confront our shadows without distraction, to see what lies beneath the roles we perform and the identities we've borrowed. It is a time of deep introspection, a symbolic unraveling of the tightly spun threads that make up our lives. And in that unraveling, a deeper clarity emerges, a glimpse of who we are beneath the layers of societal programming. Jung taught that the human psyche is not a singular force, but a dance of polarities, conscious and unconscious, masculine and feminine, light and shadow. The individuation process is, at its heart, a reconciliation of these opposites, a sacred harmonization of inner dualities. When we begin to integrate the shadow, we do not just become more whole. We unlock vast reservoirs of psychic energy that were once suppressed, hidden, or exiled. This release of inner energy brings with it a renewed sense of vitality, an upsurge of creativity, and an authenticity that can no longer be faked. But it's important to understand, this journey is not linear, nor does it arrive at a single destination. It is a lifelong unfolding, a continual deepening of awareness that evolves as we mature and encounter new thresholds of challenge and change. As we grow, the individuation process expands with us, and so too does the necessity of solitude. Isolation is not a one-time event. It re-emerges cyclically as a vital stage in our psychological and spiritual evolution. Too often, isolation is misunderstood as rejection, abandonment, or punishment. But in truth, it may be one of the universe's most powerful invitations to authenticity. You are not being pulled away out of cruelty. You are being called back to yourself. In order to discover the self in its truest and most untamed form, you must first be willing to shed everything that is not you. In our everyday lives, we are constantly bombarded by stimuli, opinions, expectations, noise that pull us further and further away from our essence. In such a chaotic world, isolation may at first feel like punishment. But beneath its seemingly harsh exterior lies a hidden gift, the invitation to go inward, to descend into the inner chamber of your soul and finally face the parts of yourself you've spent years avoiding. When the universe pulls you back from others, when doors close or paths disappear, it is not casting you out, it is guiding you home, into the silence where your real voice resides. This process is rarely comfortable, especially if you are not used to being alone or sitting with your unfiltered thoughts. In a society that glorifies distraction and productivity over presence, stillness can feel intimidating, even suffocating. But within the discomfort of silence, something sacred begins to awaken. Picture yourself suddenly enveloped in complete darkness, with no one around you. At first, the absence of light may feel overwhelming and even frightening. But stay with it. Slowly, as your eyes adjust, you begin to perceive what was previously hidden: shapes, silhouettes, the movement of shadows. What once felt terrifying now reveals a mysterious and alive inner landscape. This is precisely how isolation works. At first, you feel only the loneliness, the emptiness, perhaps even the ache of loss. But over time, if you surrender to the stillness, you begin to see what's truly within you: your fears, your desires, your long-buried dreams, and the hidden corners of yourself that have been denied for too long. It is in this silent reckoning that you rediscover your truth. To be authentic in a world obsessed with appearances is perhaps the rarest form of rebellion. But how can you truly be yourself if you've never taken the time to meet yourself? Society tells us who to be, what to want, and how to act from the moment we're born. These messages cloud our self-perception, layering us with identities that do not belong to us. This is why isolation is not a curse. It is a sanctuary. It severs the constant noise of others' expectations and gives you a sacred space to reflect without judgment. Here, you can finally be honest with yourself, not out of obligation, but because no one is watching. In this private inner chamber, you can begin to unravel the beliefs, patterns, and stories you've unconsciously accepted and start to rebuild your identity from a place of radical truth. This is not an easy task. In fact, it may be one of the most uncomfortable journeys you'll ever take. But it is necessary if you want to live a life that is truly yours. In this space, you are also given the rare chance didn't match the image you wanted to present to the world. Alone, without the world's constant distractions, you may find the courage to sit with these parts of yourself, not as enemies, but as forgotten allies. And in doing so, what once seemed like weakness begins to reveal itself as untapped strength. This reconciliation with the shadow is essential to living authentically. For only when you embrace yourself fully, light and dark, can you walk through life unafraid. Moreover, isolation teaches you something no amount of social validation ever could: how to trust your intuition. When you are no longer drowned out by the voices of others, your own voice begins to rise from the depths. And with it, your ability to make decisions from inner wisdom becomes sharper, stronger, and more reliable. Carl Jung, one of the most profound explorers of the soul, understood this deeply. To him, Solitude was not simply the absence of people. It was a psychological state, an alchemical process of transformation. As he once said, loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself. True isolation, then, is not about emptiness, it is about depth. And in that depth, you may finally find yourself. This kind of solitude, the one that can strike even when we are surrounded by a crowd, is often the very force that ignites inner growth and profound transformation. When we feel isolated, we tend to interpret it as something negative, as if it were a sign that something in our lives is broken. But through the lens of Jungian psychology, these deep, piercing moments of loneliness may in fact signal something sacred, a spiritual summons calling us toward a deeper understanding of ourselves, of the world, and of our place within it. In this way, solitude becomes not a sentence, but a sacred threshold, a portal through which we distance ourselves from outer distractions in order to touch the quiet, unshakable truth within. This is not just any solitude. It is what we might call creative solitude, the kind experienced by great artists, philosophers, and spiritual leaders when they descend into the hidden chambers of their mind and emerge with new visions, revelations, and truths. Creative solitude is not passive. It is not the stillness of despair or idleness. It is an active state of inner exploration, a fertile ground for self-discovery. In this space, the mind detaches from the trivial obligations of daily life and turns inward, toward the source of inspiration and inner wisdom. Artists, for instance, often seek out isolation not to escape life, but to enter more deeply into it. It is within this cocoon of quiet that they access parts of themselves obscured by routine, where the most vivid images and authentic expressions of their soul are born. In this space, the constraints of social conventions dissolve, and what emerges is raw, real, and deeply personal. Philosophers and spiritual visionaries, too, have long retreated into silence to encounter their own voice, free from the noise of the world. Some of the most revolutionary ideas in history were conceived in these sacred silences, in the stillness where the individual confronts the most essential questions of existence and finds answers that cannot be heard amid the chaos of the world. This kind of isolation is not only a spark for creativity, it compels us to question, to reflect, to wrestle with the uncomfortable truths we've buried beneath distraction. When all the noise fades and we're left alone with ourselves, there is no more avoiding what we've long denied. We meet our own shadow, our insecurities, contradictions, and long-hidden fears. This encounter may be painful, but it is crucial, for it is through this honest confrontation that we begin to shed the illusions that have quietly shaped our lives. The roles we've played, the stories we've clung to, the beliefs that have limited our becoming. As we peel back these layers, something astonishing happens. We begin to transform, not superficially, but at the deepest level. We stop being the version of ourselves molded by others' expectations and start becoming someone new, more aligned, more whole, more real. Solitude, then, is not mere disconnection. It is a sacred rebirth. Just as the butterfly must withdraw into the still darkness of its chrysalis, we too must enter isolation to emerge transformed. And when we do, what arises is not just an internal shift. It radiates outward. Inside, we become more self-aware, more honest, more attuned to our authentic desires, fears, and longings. Outside, we begin to relate to the world differently, not from a place of trying to belong, but from a place of already belonging to ourselves. We no longer bend to meet others' expectations or walk paths that betray our soul. Instead, we begin to live in alignment with our own truth, our own values, and our own purpose. Solitude, though often misunderstood, is one of the most sacred crucibles in which emotional and mental resilience is forged. When you stand alone, stripped of the constant presence, distraction, or validation of others, you are forced to confront your fears and inner challenges face to face. And it is in this very confrontation that something alchemical occurs. you begin to strengthen from within. You become more self-reliant, more capable of navigating life's inevitable storms, not because someone held your hand through them, but because you learned to steady yourself. This inner strength is one of solitude's most profound rewards, a deep-rooted sense of autonomy and freedom that no external force can provide. Carl Jung, in his exploration of the psyche and the greater cosmos, introduced a concept that deepens our understanding of these quiet stretches of life: synchronicity. It is a word that has enchanted many, not only for its poetic nature, but for its power to reveal how seemingly random events are deeply interwoven with meaning and invisible connections. Synchronicity teaches us that what looks like mere coincidence may actually be a sign, an intentional thread in the greater fabric of your life. From this perspective, isolation is not an empty void, but a sacred interval, a space being carved by the universe to prepare you for something that has not yet arrived in your conscious awareness. When the universe distances you, whether through external events or an internal urge to withdraw, it may be setting into motion a hidden orchestration of events that will only later reveal their significance. Though this isolation may feel painful or confusing while you are in it, it could very well be the prelude to a revelation, a breakthrough, or an inner transformation that alters the entire trajectory of your life. So often the most pivotal shifts don't arrive in the noise of movement, but in the hush of stillness, when the puzzle pieces begin to fall into place in ways you never expected. In these moments, your role is not to rush or resist, but to trust. Trust that this space, though quiet, is alive with purpose. Trust that even the stillness has a pulse. Synchronicity invites us to see life not as a series of random occurrences, but as a grand and complex tapestry, where every thread, even the loose or painful ones, holds significance. Isolation, then, is not an interruption of life, but a sacred stage of it, a time when the soul prepares for a new understanding, a shift in vision, or a passage into an entirely new chapter. Jung believed the unconscious, this vast sea of symbols, archetypes, and psychological energies, is always in dialogue with us, not only through dreams or mystical signs, but through solitude itself. In the silence of being alone, far from the noise of the world, we become finely attuned to the subtle messages trying to reach us from within. It's as if solitude sharpens our inner ear, helping us receive what could not be heard before. This space becomes fertile ground for intuition, for insight, for the quiet birth of new ways of understanding your life and your purpose. The emptiness you once feared transforms into sacred soil, where clarity takes root and truths, long hidden beneath the clutter, where revelations can unfold that would have been lost in the chaos of daily life. Like a seed buried in the dark, your inner being may be silently germinating, growing, evolving, and preparing to break through the surface when the time is right. This time of isolation also allows you to notice patterns and connections that may have escaped you before. What once felt like disconnected events or random meetings began to form a meaningful constellation. In solitude, you can step back, see the broader landscape of your life, and discover the coherence beneath it all. You begin to connect the dots, to recognize that the encounters, challenges, and synchronicities you've experienced were not accidents, but elements of a larger, hidden design unfolding through you. Moreover, isolation transforms your experience of time itself. In our everyday reality, we are tethered to the clock, to the notion that time moves in a linear sequence from past to future. But solitude reveals something far more mysterious, a timelessness where the past, present, and future swirl together in strange and beautiful ways. In these moments, you may feel that something from your past suddenly makes sense in the light of today, or that a subtle intuition about the future is beginning to unfold inside you now. Isolation bends the lines of time and opens you to a realm where meaning flows more freely, where you are not just surviving the silence, but receiving from it. The concept of the dark night of the soul stands as one of the most profound and demanding passages within both spiritual awakening and depth psychology. First articulated by the 16th century Spanish mystic San John of the Cross, It refers to a soul-wrenching period when one feels utterly severed from God, from purpose, and even from one's own identity. This experience is not just a moment of emotional despair, it is an existential unraveling where the familiar scaffolding of one's inner world collapses and is replaced by an oppressive silence that seems to echo without end. You feel swallowed by an invisible void, with no clear direction forward. Carl Jung, through his exploration of the unconscious and the transformative path of individuation, recognized this phenomenon not as a sign of ruin, but as a sacred stage in the journey toward wholeness. From Jung's lens, the dark night is not a descent into failure, it is a descent into purification. It is the psyche's descent into its own underworld, not to perish, but to emerge reborn, more authentic, more aligned, and far closer to its true purpose. During this phase, we are compelled to meet the figures hiding in the shadows of our unconscious, the inner demons we've kept buried beneath busyness, denial, or distraction. These may arise as unresolved fears, suppressed traumas, old wounds, or hidden longings. They represent the shadow self, those disowned parts of us we were taught to reject. But in the darkness they rise with force, demanding to be seen, held, and integrated. This confrontation is not gentle, it is often disorienting, even agonizing. It strips away the masks, the identities, the illusions we've clung to. Yet, it is only through this symbolic death of the old self that the new self can be born. Here, isolation plays a crucial role, not as punishment, but as sacred containment. It is the womb of transformation. In this solitary space, we are finally able to hear what the noise of the world has long drowned out. It is in this place of internal exile that the soul begins its quiet purification, shedding everything that has clouded its vision and tethered it to patterns that no longer serve its evolution. This inner night is not a punishment, but a sacred alchemy. Just as the ancient alchemists reduced raw matter to its base elements to transmute it into gold, so too must we be reduced to our essence, stripped of every false role and attachment, so that something greater can emerge. The soul, in this darkness, does not dissolve, it begins to distill. Yes, it feels like a loss. Yes, it feels like death. But what dies is the illusion, not the truth, and what survives is stronger, deeper, and infinitely more real. The dark night of the soul is ultimately an act of grace, though it often wears the mask of devastation. It prepares the ground for a rebirth that cannot be accessed through ease or comfort. In walking through this shadowed corridor, we begin to break free from the prison of old beliefs, outdated identities, and inherited fears. What emerges is not just a wiser version of the self, but a soul reborn into a new chapter of life that resonates with a clarity once unimagined. Jung believed this process wasn't just necessary for the rare mystic or philosopher, it was essential to every person's path of individuation. To become whole, we must first walk through the hollow places we've abandoned. We must face what we once feared would consume us and discover instead that it transforms us. The dark night brings with it the chance to reconcile with the forgotten fragments of our being, to weave the shadow into the self. And this integration, though forged in pain, creates a self that is more complete, more grounded, and far more compassionate toward oneself and others. Beyond the psychological, this journey deepens our relationship with the divine itself. The sacred is no longer found in inherited beliefs or second-hand ideas. It is found in direct experience, in the burning away of what is false, and the quiet revelation of what is eternal. Here, spirituality becomes personal, raw, and deeply alive. You are no longer seeking answers outside of you, you are becoming the living question. And the truth you discover is not something that can be taught. It is something only the soul, having walked through the fire, can remember. In his profound exploration of the human psyche, Carl Jung gave the unconscious a central and sacred place, seeing it not merely as a storage house of suppressed memories or past experiences, but as a living source of deep wisdom and inner guidance. To Jung, The unconscious was a vast ocean teeming with symbols, archetypes, and psychological forces. An inner cosmos that, though often hidden beneath the surface of daily life, rises to speak when we create the silence to listen. Isolation, in Jung's view, becomes the sacred doorway into this neglected realm. When we are removed from the constant stimulation and distractions of the outer world, when we are finally left alone with ourselves, our inner life begins to speak. In solitude, the unconscious doesn't whisper, it echoes. And through the lens of synchronicity, this isolation reveals itself as an intricately woven tapestry, where even the loose, forgotten threads hold meaning. In this deeper context, solitude is not just disconnection, it is gestation. It is the threshold before a new vision, a new direction, and a new chapter is born. Jung believed that the unconscious, this vast and sacred interior world, is always in conversation with us, not only through dreams or sudden synchronicities, but also through the quiet, reflective space of isolation. In the absence of external noise, we begin to hear more clearly. The solitude sharpens our perception, heightens our sensitivity, and opens our inner ear to the subtle messages that rise from the depths. This quiet space becomes fertile ground for insight, for breakthrough, for a rediscovery of meaning and purpose. Isolation, then, is not an empty void. It is a charged space of becoming. In such sacred stillness, the universe finds its most direct path to speak with you, to reveal truths that would otherwise remain buried beneath the noise and chaos of daily life. It is a time of incubation, where something new begins to take shape within you, often beyond your immediate awareness. Like a seed planted deep in the dark soil, this solitude also offers you a rare opportunity to observe the invisible patterns of your life, to finally see the connections you had previously overlooked. Synchronicity emerges through these very patterns, revealing that your experiences, your encounters, your wounds and revelations are not random, but part of a grander design. In aloneness, you begin to trace the invisible thread, connect the hidden dots, and unveil the deeper meaning behind your life's unfolding. Isolation becomes the vantage point from which you can step back, see the full picture, and recognize the sacred coherence that has been guiding you all along. Even more powerfully, isolation transforms your relationship with time itself. In the rush of everyday life, we are trapped in a narrow, linear view of time, where events seem to move in predictable sequence, one after the other. But in solitude, time begins to bend. Synchronicity teaches us that the past, present, and future are not separate lines but deeply interconnected layers. In these quiet moments, you may feel how something from your past still pulses within your present, or how a vision from the future is already stirring in your intuition. These are not illusions. They are inner truths waiting to be born. The dark night of the soul, one of the most sacred and challenging experiences in spiritual and psychological life, echoes everything we've explored. First named by 16th century Spanish mystic St. John of the Cross, this state describes a spiritual crisis so deep that it feels as though we are severed from God, from our sense of meaning, and even from ourselves. It is an existential silence, an aching emptiness, with no clear direction forward. Jung deeply understood this inner night and recognized it as essential to the journey of individuation. From a Jungian perspective, the dark night is not merely suffering, it is purification. The soul descends into darkness not to die, but to be reborn, stronger, clearer, and closer to its original truth. During this sacred descent, the individual is brought face to face with their deepest fears, long-buried wounds, and the exiled parts of their psyche. These inner shadows, fears, insecurities, traumas, hidden desires, rise to the surface, no longer willing to remain in silence. It is painful, even excruciating, to meet the parts of ourselves we've long denied. But it is in this meeting that transformation begins. The dark night strips away our old masks, our false identities, and forces us to let go of the attachments that have kept us bound to self-sabotaging cycles. Isolation, in this context, is not punishment. It is the alchemical container for profound inner change. In the dark night of the soul, solitude becomes a sacred fire. It burns away illusions and distractions, clearing the path for authentic vision. Just as ancient alchemists reduced matter to its most essential form before transformation, this inner night reduces us to our essence, so that something sacred can rise from the ashes. It is painful because it is a symbolic death. But it is necessary because what dies is false and what emerges is real. This process of dissolution and rebirth is, at its core, an act of divine love and grace. Though it may feel like everything is collapsing, the truth is that a deeper foundation is being prepared. A spiritual rebirth is being readied beneath the surface. By walking through this darkness, you are liberated from the prison of old identities and limiting beliefs. You are guided, often unknowingly, into a new life, one more aligned with your truest self. The dark night is not the end. It is the sacred womb of a deeper beginning. It serves a vital evolutionary purpose in the process of individuation. Jung saw it not as an exception, but as a necessary rite of passage for psychological and spiritual growth. Through this crisis, we are invited to integrate our shadow, to reconcile with what we have rejected, and in doing so, we become whole. Perhaps most beautifully, the dark night offers a chance to form a deeper, more intimate relationship with the divine, or whatever name you give to the mystery that guides you. In this space, surface beliefs and second-hand truths fall away. What remains is what you have lived, what you have endured, and what your soul has survived. This new connection to the sacred is not learned, it is remembered. Not taught, but embodied. Not inherited, but born within the depths of your being. So if you find yourself isolated, remember, the universe may not be abandoning you, it may be preparing you. Not for more of what was, but for what you have never known before. Something real, something whole, something eternal. If something within this message stirred you, if even a single word mirrored your inner experience, I invite you to let your voice be heard in the comments. Have you encountered that soul whose presence feels like home, or are you still walking the sacred path back to yourself? Your story, however unfinished, may become the lantern in someone else's darkness, the very sign they didn't know they were searching for. And if someone close to you is silently struggling with the illusion that love must hurt, that self-abandonment is the price of connection, or that they are unworthy of peace, share this video with them. Help me reach the ones who need to remember. Real love does not demand that we shrink. True connection does not ask for sacrifice of the soul. And the most vital union we will ever form is the one with our own inner truth. Before you go, I invite you to subscribe and activate the notification bell. Here, in this space, we journey beneath the surface of things, exploring the hidden architecture of the psyche, the whispers of the unconscious, and how every relationship is but a mirror reflecting our personal evolution. If there's a theme, a question, or a wound you would like us to explore in future videos, leave it below. This space breathes because of you. Your voice is not only welcome here, it is essential. Thank you for showing up, not just to this video, but to your inner work, to the sacred labor of remembering who you truly are. And always remember this, when the right person appears, your soul will know, not through fear, but through peace. But until that moment, let your most intimate relationship be the one you cultivate within. That is the foundation, that is the home. And from that wholeness, all things real are born. Until next time, I'll see you on the path.